cold, clean water for the trout, same as people. As you might have guessed, I did not win my bid for president. The election, however, was not stolen from me. No, it was not. We just simply misplaced it. Forgot where we put it, you know. Now, those folks would recall that I was well known for a number of things in this community, but first of all, I was a son. I was a son to my parents. I was the eldest of 3 sons to Ernest and Audrey Hamp. Ernest went by Woody, and he was a postal worker in Battle Creek for a long time. Audrey, her maiden name was Mills. Now, I always was mindful and respectful of my parents when they were present. It's true. Some would not perhaps remember me as a particularly good boy. This is a story I was reminded of just yesterday, that when I was around 6 years old, my parents went out and left me with a babysitter, and we were playing an innocent game of cowboys and Indians, and she let me tie her up with a rope, not realizing that I was skilled in the art of knot tying, and I tied her up so well she couldn't get herself free, and so I just left her that way, and then destroyed the house. In the meantime, I picked all the flowers off my mother's plants and drew pictures all over the walls. I think when my folks got home, they were very, very unimpressed with my artwork after they cut the babysitter loose. I'm certain they probably didn't pay her near enough. Well, I'd rather been hunting and fishing. I attended and graduated at Union City Schools. Do you know what the most generous gift the Union City Schools ever give to anyone? It's when they gave me my high school diploma. Very generous of them. I do believe there was people there that were secretly glad to see me go when I graduated. And go I did. Not something folks might not know about me is I enlisted in the United States Navy on the buddy program right out of high school. I went to boot camp at the Naval Station Great Lakes. Upon my arrival, the Navy was kind enough to teach me how to swim. You know how they do that? They got a really interesting program there. They just shove you off into deep, cold water, and you teach yourself how to swim instantly. I was not a good swimmer, but after just a few minutes with the Navy, they had me swimming around like a carp in spawning season. I could swim real good. I spent time training as a naval firefighter in Texas, and eventually found myself in the Mediterranean Sea, a long, long way from home, on a rather famous, what Martha reminded me is a ship and not a boat. A boat is for fishing. I was on a ship. I was on the USS Forrestal, and you should remember the name, the USS Forrestal. It's very famous. It was the largest supercarrier of its kind on God's green ocean. The Forrestal was called First in Defense, or FID, or the fifth, right here on the arm there. The ship was the first of its kind, and it was specifically made to support jet-powered aircraft. It was the first one. My station was on the deck of that ship, and as aircraft controller, I was responsible for ensuring that those very expensive assets did not run into one another or me, right? And so it was a very dangerous job. It was very challenging. In fact, how dangerous was it? The USS Forrestal became known disparagingly by many as the USS Zippo, as the Zippo lighter. The USS Forest Fire, they called it, on account of the many fires that they had aboard ship. The last one of the ones that they had killed over 132 service members. Defending the country is serious business. The Navy was serious business. I was honorably discharged in 1960. I was very proud of the service that I performed to my country, but I was very, very glad to come home. I married my dearest friend, the love of my life, my navigator, Martha Preston, in 1961. I met her when I submitted, at my father's behest, I submitted an application for a job where she happened to work. I got the job, and after a while, I asked her to marry me. And Martha wasn't too keen on marrying me at first. She didn't say yes right away. She had opinions, and she required that I give up smoking. And so I quit smoking, just like that. Cold turkey. Mostly. For a while. I didn't know how cold that turkey was going to get. So I did relapse, but Martha forgave me, and I'm so glad that she did. I'm sure it wasn't the only time she had to forgive me. Now, our lives were blessed at the arrival of our son Scott in 1964. I'm sure many remember or know Scott. He is as fine as a man as any. He's always blessed our home. And Scott, like all children do for their parents, he taught us the true meaning of words we thought we already knew, like love and kindness and patience. And it's a good thing that he wasn't as naughty as I was when I was a kid, for sure. I worked 20 years more or less in Battle Creek and Marshall, and I ended up working at the Eaton's Corporation. You folks remember Eaton's? Martha and I sure do. Those were rather bleak times. A lot of places were closing in Battle Creek at that time. A lot of people were losing their jobs or about to, and there was a lot of uncertainty. And if you remember, you know, a lot of people were in the same boat. Our family was hurting, and it was hard to imagine that it would get better, but it did. Eventually it did. I began working as a substitute custodian at Union City Schools. The pay was a pittance compared to Eaton's pay, but the hours weren't very attractive either. It was basically second shift. But we both worked, and we simply forged ahead, and again, there was a lot of folks in the same situation. We were lucky, though. We had 10 acres of land north of Reed City. It's about 2 hours north of here, and it had a little primitive hunting shack. More like a primitive, like a live-in hunting blind. They had all the amenities of home, wall-to-wall plywood, and it didn't have any water, and it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but we really took advantage of the excellent deer hunting that it provided. Martha and I were very successful deer hunters. Martha has a very impressive collection of racks on her garage wall today. She may not look like much, but she can drop the hammer on a buck sure as you're sitting there. She's my kind of woman, that's for sure. Now, I should say that during my 17 years of working for Union City Schools, I made lots of friends. A lot of people knew me. People would know me as a person who's very quick with a smile or a joke to make you laugh, or perhaps even a joke, you know, that might make you blush once in a while. I can maybe make you blush. I really loved the kids at the school. I would often go to work a little early just so I could see them. There were some that I'd pick on or talk to and have a smile, and if some appeared to be in need of some fatherly advice or a swift kick, I would always do what I could to be a positive influence on people. Martha would reflect on the irony around the fact that I disliked school so much as a young person and at working in one for so long. It wasn't unusual to find me talking to someone about hunting and fly fishing. I'd often practice my fly rod casting right out in front of the high school before the gym was there. I'd always bring an extra rod, and I introduced a number of people to the fine art of fly casting and fly tying. And I love to share my passion with anyone who might be interested. Now, my popularity didn't go unnoticed in the community. A famous author, Patricia Polacco, as you know, probably know her, she included me posthumously in this book, Welcome Comfort. It's kind of it's poignant that I would end up in a book because I was a voracious reader and I loved books. I love the old Zane Grey westerns, the shoot 'em ups, the works of Mark Twain like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I once painted a lovely river raft scene inspired by the book Tom Sawyer. It was one of my favorite books. I also love to read Patrick T. McManus. Now, if you don't know the works of Patrick T. McManus, his books are a delight to read, and many folks in the day were very familiar with his works and the characters in his book. So there was a certain Mr. John Sonkrant in town, the dime store owner, and he used to call me Rancid Crabtree. Rancid Crabtree was a character that he was a cantankerous woodsman. We'd probably call him a hillbilly here today, but he was a cantankerous woodsman, and he was a bit of a poor fellow. And he never took a bath, except for the exception one time he fell into a creek in 1927. They said that his stench was so bad that he once approached town from an upwind direction, and everybody thought that the stockyards had caught on fire. Any time that John called me Rancid Crabtree, I took that as a compliment. I really did. So no matter where I was or what I might be doing, you can bet that some part of me was lost in thoughts of things like woodcraft, camping and hunting, fishing for sure. How about the making of beautiful, intricate jewelry, leather craft? This is an example of a holster that I made. It's beautiful. It's beautiful work. The stitching is guaranteed for life. It's very high quality. And also, I should say, painting and drawing, of course. And these brushes, as a matter of fact, these are my brushes. They're still in use today. They painted the signs for the SHP just the other day. They're in the use of a wonderful talented Union City artist today. And speaking of drawing, so I could draw at a very young age. It was made me very popular in class. The kids, they'd bring me a piece of paper and they'd say, "Can you draw a dog?" And I'd draw a dog. And they'd say, "Can you draw a zebra?" And I'd say, "Sure." And I'd draw a zebra, which just a bigger dog with stripes, right? It was pretty easy. People would say that I had a natural gift for that, but the reality was I worked hard at it. It was my craft and I loved to do it, and I worked diligently at it. I always tried to improve my art. I was once just very dissatisfied with the way that I painted trees. You know Bob Ross? You ever heard of Bob Ross? Well, unlike Bob Ross, my trees were not happy. They were unhappy trees. So I sought the tutelage of the local art teacher, and I took lessons, and I focused on the painting of trees, and the painting of trees improved dramatically as a result. I love to, I found great joy in like reading a how-to book and then turning it into a practical use or a practical thing for art. Folks all around would remember me as a prolific sign maker. I painted many signs, too many for me to remember, and I should say I dislike being called a sign maker. I was an artist, and I would remind people of that. One sign in particular that you might be familiar with is a sign that I painted on the side of Merchant's Hardware. There was some concern beforehand that the paint would peel off. The building had a notorious inability to not be able to hold paint for very long. I assured them that my sign would not peel off, and I professionally prepared the surface, and I adorned the building with a lovely sign, and true to my word, that sign did not peel off. In fact, years later, when it came time to remove the sign, they could not remove it. It took them longer to remove the sign than it ever would have taken me to paint it. I was driven to the adventure offered by the great outdoors, the lakes and the rivers and the streams. And because of our work schedules, Martha and I could only really see each other on weekends. It wasn't uncommon for us to pack up the car with some provisions and strike out in search of some good trout water. That can be hard to find in Lower Michigan. We'd grab the road atlas and she'd navigate while I drove around, and we always found ourselves somewhere to drop a line and try to angle up a catch. If the fish weren't biting right away, Martha would be keen to drop back and fish out a book from somewhere. You know, librarians, they always got a book squirreled away somewhere, and she would sit on the bank and read while I fished. Isn't that nice? Isn't that the life? You know, there's a saying, all of the words in all of the pages of all the books one can read, it can never save you from the final page. It's hard to believe it was 28 years ago. I had what seemed to be a fairly common health concern. It was in no way looked upon as being a sort of a major issue. It required a surgical procedure. It was outpatient. It did not go as planned. There were complications, and the surgery took much longer than anticipated. As a precaution, they admitted me for an overnight stay in the hospital, but upon preparing me for release the next day, I suffered an unexpected embolism and I passed away instantly. Martha was at my side. I was 59. Now, I would never let a crowd go away sad if I had anything to say about it. And so if you have a story or an anecdote or any type of tale or remembrance of me, you have the floor. Who remembers anything about me?
Well, he was a great neighbor, I'll say that. He was our neighbor, and always fun. Like you said, he would tell off-color jokes a lot sometimes. It was a lot of fun. He was great. Learned a lot from him, and he was good neighbor.
We had good neighbors.
Oh yeah, you guys had your best neighbors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. This is Martha, by the way.
Because he would go over there. They could pick up channels on TV that we couldn't get with the antenna that was the V in the house, you know. And what was it, All in the Family or something like that? And he just thought that was all right. They put up with him for a good hour and a half for these different various programs that we couldn't pick up on ours. They were very gracious neighbors.
I substituted as janitor at the intermediate school, and
you were on days that day, and I come in and I looked at the gym floor, and it was all scuffed up. And you said, "Hey, you don't have to mop this whole thing. You just take your tennis shoe and you just go like this on those black marks, and they'll disappear." And I thought, you must be nuts. But I tried it, and it worked. And so I just danced all over the floor, erasing those marks, and did not have to mop. Thank you.
Well, my friends, in the words of Mark Twain, there is no worse death than to be talked to death. So when you come to this hallowed place beside the beautiful St. Joseph River, be sure to remember me. Feel free to stop by and say hello. Take a look at the beautiful view. It's wonderful, especially in the springtime. And if you look across there, across the woods in the springtime, you'll see where I played as a child. I would build a camp, I would fish, I would build a fire, and I'd cook beans for all my friends, whether they liked them or not. So if you look, it's still there, and I'm still here. And I hope to see you all around my campfire. Thank you.